Hello and welcome back to this episode of Unleash Your Inner Athlete with me, Julia Pizzichemi. Now today in this episode, we're going to be exploring a subject that resonates with many active women who play sport professionally. And when they hit menopause, they still want to stay at the top of their game. Now, I'm thrilled to welcome back with me my sports physiotherapist, who's obviously worked within medical teams with elite world-class elite athletes, helping them not only stay at peak performance, but, navigate injury prevention. So I'd really like to welcome back Laura Chimimba. Hello, Laura. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah,
it's good to have you back again. I'm so glad you made it. And I know in this episode, we're going to dive deep into this subject. And we're going to look at things like, when you go through menopause, how does that affect athletic performance? Do the changes in your hormones actually affect your training? And what about nutrition? How do you adapt those strategies at this time of your life and beyond? We're going to look at the sort of exercises you might be doing that could be helpful to you. Does hormone replacement therapy, does that affect your sports performance? And are you actually at higher risk of injury when you're going through menopause? What Laura will also be doing later is giving you some practical tips that are going to help you perhaps navigate sort of menopause symptoms and help you reduce those symptoms, and will supporting you through intense training so you can really begin and continue to enjoy your sports that you love and thrive as you go through this stage in your life. So, Laura, let's get into this subject. It's one that certainly resonates with me. I mean, I've never been a professional athlete, but I know I've trained hard all my life, and I am now in full menopause. So I kind of get it. But, I'm not a professional athlete. And there's many women out there like me, they keep fit, or they're your regular woman who goes through it and they go through all these symptoms. But how does that differ to someone who has been a professional athlete? They've put their body through quite a lot of, physical trauma and mental stress with that whole lifestyle. Is there much difference in how the body responds at this stage in your life?
Probably not. Okay. I think one of the key things with kind of menopause and also that kind of perimenopausal type period, which is that kind of 10 years leading up to actual full-blown menopause when hormones are like reducing, is there's not a one size fits all. Okay. So in terms of what symptoms people are going to experience and how that kind of change in hormonal status is going to impact them will vary person to person. So that's the same whether you're just a normal person or, an elite athlete, ex-athlete. I think where differences may occur will be potentially expectations. Because also from athletes, when they're at their peak, they're used to kind of training hard, performing well, they have that pressure to perform consistently. And during perimenopause and menopause, you have a wide range of symptoms. Okay, so that can be cognitive type symptoms such as brain fog. There can be anxiety, depressive type elements as well, which may impact your motivation. Okay, so that might be a shock to someone who's perhaps find it very easy to get motivated to train, where all of a sudden they're kind of feeling lethargic, they can't be bothered. They've just kind of lost that get up and go, which may be a big issue for some people. You've also got the impact on sleep. Okay, so it's quite common through that kind of stage of life for your sleep to get worse. Okay, so people might be more prone to insomnia. So that's going to affect how you recover. Okay, if you are still training quite regularly, so that's then going to have a knock-on effect in terms of future sessions, and also just the amount of fatigue you're feeling is also going to affect how motivated you are. Okay. And even without that, just fatigue and low energy in general is a significant symptom for folk. And I think the other big thing that people may find as they're going into that menopausal stage of life is body composition changes. Okay, particularly around the midriff, you're more prone to putting on weight around your trunk. Okay, so that can have a significant effect in terms of, you know, if you're putting on weight, you're having to move with more body weight, okay? Depending on the style of training, your sport, that might have an impact to performance. And again, from the mood element, okay? You know, aesthetics shouldn't impact us, but also for a lot of people, how they look is a big factor in motivation, self-esteem. So again, that leads back into some of the cognitive elements of, for some people, that may have a huge impact on their confidence, particularly in sports or activities where maybe you do have to work out maybe tight-fitting clothes, so say something like swimming. Okay?
And I was actually thinking of that from a particularly, you know, if you're the more high profile you are, and you've also always been in the public eye and been perceived to be this super athletic person with this fabulous physique.
Yeah,
that's now becoming a challenge to maintain that.
Yeah, and that's something obviously female athletes tend to find throughout their careers that they are judged on how they look. So for those of them who have either had an extremely high profile at the peak of their career, or maintain a relatively high media-based profile after retirement, sadly, like, you know, magazines, people do pass judgment, especially with social media. So I suspect from that front, there'll be quite a few of them will be impacted perhaps a bit more, because you're not maybe just getting random comments from friends, family, people who might be close to you that might put a throwaway comment out there. You could literally have tens of thousands of people commenting on that change in body type. So it's definitely something that I think probably in terms of the breadth of symptoms the women experience, it does need to be normalized and spoken about a bit more, so that people actually understand what's normal, okay? And we're not expecting miracles from folk. It's like, because people age, it's, you know, part of
life, isn't it?
Exactly. So I think that is a big thing of being comfortable with. But I think on the other side is also being open to not using it as an excuse, okay? It's because I think we have this image of what aging may or may not be. And there are limits to what we can change as we get older. But there's also that point, it's not a case of as you start noticing that, you know, your perimenopause, menopausal symptoms coming on, you know, your periods are becoming more irregular, eventually stopping, because also that menopause period of life starts after 1 year after your final period. That you're not just going, this is inevitable. You know, there are lifestyle things you can do to make that transition a lot more comfortable. So that's really important to acknowledge, because also health risks will change for women as we get older and we lose some of that protective effect of estrogen, which is our main sex hormone that declines during the menopause. So things like bone density can reduce quite significantly, and that also increases your risk of osteoporosis, which as we get older is a huge thing in terms of risk of getting breaks. So if we fall...
But then when you've had that, obviously you've had that foundation of a sports career, even though it's been intensive training, is that a benefit in terms of, because you would have had such strong bones and muscles based on you having to train so intensively, although you've come obviously with the risks, you've had injuries, etc. But does that set you up maybe for a better aging process as you get older and going through that menopause?
No, of course, because basically it's the older you get, you can't add bone density. Okay, so if you have done things in your youth that will maximize your bone density, so that will be also dietary elements of having good calcium intake, good just calorific intake, but also the fact you've done some weight bearing exercise. Okay, your baseline is going to start higher. Okay, so that natural decline should give you a wee bit of protection. Okay, so definitely from a lifestyle perspective, it's also really key for us that, you know, we do encourage young girls to take up sport and prevent them, try and minimize them dropping out, because that's a big issue in youth sports. Of girls do tend to drop out of sport at a much higher rate than boys. So it's trying to get whatever barriers are causing that, to can make sure we're doing all we can to make sure teenage girls, kids feel they can keep on playing sport through life, and they will start off in a much better place. And I think, though, the other thing from like that protective benefit for bone density, it will also vary by sport. Okay, so also people that may be predominantly just swimmers. Okay, swimming is not a weight-bearing sport, okay, because they're also supported by the water. So their swim training will give them a lot of benefits with regards to cardiovascular, so their health, so in terms of their heart and lungs, but it doesn't load the bones. Okay, so unless someone has done additional training, so also for swimmers who have potentially trained at a more competitive level, that maybe have a bit additional S&C support, they'll do a bit more in the gym. They can also counteract that. But that's something to bear in mind. Of don't just assume if you've done sport, it's automatically got to be protected from that bony point. It very much depends on that.
So it's adding in those elements of strength and conditioning that's needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of like a big factor. And then it's just making sure also things like diet, because there's also other sports that perhaps historically have had a higher incidence of disordered eating. Some of the more aesthetic sports and things like dance as well, where in the past has been very stereotypically aimed at maybe performance with a smaller frame. Okay. And, there have been some cultures where, coaches have maybe encouraged under eating. Okay. That will, again, put you at higher risk of lower bone density. So again, even though things like dance does have that high impact on the bones, which should be protective, if you're not eating enough during those formative years where you can really maximize the building of bone density, you're not going to get that benefit long term. Okay.
Because nutrition's really, for whatever your activity, whether it's like dance or sport, eating well is really crucial for you being able to perform. So the fact that people are encouraged to undereat, it seems ludicrous, but we know it happens. And then that affects you later in life. It's, it goes with you. It's part of that journey.
Yep, 100%. And I think cultures are changing there, and more and more people are working to get healthier issues in there, and like you say, emphasizing that need for performance. But I think it's just going. It's like that area of like that early days of it can really have that impact, because if you haven't eaten enough, if you're unfortunate to be in that situation, that's also going to have an impact on things like your menstrual cycle and those that puberty phase of life. And what you find is also that delayed onset of menstruation, which is common in those sports or areas where people are training at very high volume. There's potential that risk of underfueling. That there is also some links with that delayed onset of menarche can influence when you have your menopause. Now, obviously, that menopause age is predominantly predicted by genetics. Okay, so probably for most women, it's like if you're having those conversations with like your gran, aunt, mum, you could probably have a rough idea, if they've had an early onset of menopause, you're going to be at a higher risk of having that yourself. But things like that delayed onset of menarche, so if your first period is basically delayed because you've maybe been super sporty. Okay.
Yeah.
That, along with a couple of other bits and pieces, may actually bring forward your menopause very slightly, or affect that period. So again,
so it could start your menopause earlier.
So I think there's a little bit of evidence. So it's not going to be necessarily a huge shift, but things like being in some of the longer term, like hormonal contraceptives, a delayed onset start of your period. So again, it's just that life cycle of your hormonal function. can affect you kind of later down the line. Okay. So it's just something that I think for people who maybe are either still kind of a bit younger earlier on in their athletic career, or if they're maybe thinking about their kids, it is just trying to get those good habits in terms of early on of getting the right advice about things like nutrition, just so that, you know, during puberty, girls go through that kind of normal cycle with their periods. Because I think that there used to be for a long time, it was just accepted that girls who were sporty would not necessarily have a period, and it wasn't really taken seriously. Whereas now, I think medicine in particular has taken a big shift of that, and I think people are more aware about how important that is. Okay.
And you do have to take a long-term view of it as well. It's not just what's happening now. You've got to think, how is this going to affect me in the future, when I want to have children, and then later in life as well, and what I want to do later in life.
So I think that's kind of important for everyone just to kind of go, what are the key things? So, you know, getting a good training load, getting the right nutrition, it just sets you up for being in a much better condition whenever your menopause does eventually start. So
well, the research does say that, you know, professional athletes, if they continue to train after their career has finished and they have a much better aging experience. So that would follow through with women who are then going on and still playing a sport competitively and want to play it competitively later in life, and that having that continuing to train to some degree is going to prove really beneficial to them.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, 100%. Because I think it's once you've got that routine and you've got that baseline, it's a lot easier to maintain. I think probably the big change that athletes would have to just keep in mind is as you age through the decades, how you train will likely need to change. Okay. So it doesn't necessarily mean they need to slow down in terms of going, okay, I'm just going to cut down and do one session a week. But they need to be open-minded of, you know, certain sessions where they would have needed the minimum amount of recovery in their 20s. They may need to actually go, I can't do that kind of session as frequently. I can't do double training sessions anymore because I just need, you know, anything that's maybe at a higher intensity takes a lot longer to recover. Okay. And that's when they maybe then go, right, they swap their training, maybe do a bit more strength training. They maybe are doing a bit more mobility instead. So their overall total volume might still be similar, but it's how that week is programmed may vary to accommodate the additional recovery they may need. Because it's that point of when you take account for someone who maybe does experience fatigue as one of their main elements. Okay, it's if you're doing lots and lots of high intensity training, okay, you're going to increase the amount of cortisol you produce, which is one of our stress hormones, okay, which is helpful when it's elevated for short periods of time because it's like a fight or flight type stress hormone.
Yep.
However, if you're training a lot, okay, and you find as your estrogen drops, your cortisol levels do increase a wee bit anyway. Okay, so you're already started off in an elevated position. Okay, if you're doing lots of high intensity, that's going to elevate that further. So your body's got to be in a constant state of stress and won't get that ability to recover. Okay, which can have impacts on how you can process like blood sugars. So again, that can almost exacerbate the whole issue with weight gain. Okay, so that's where people then need to start going. If like I feel exhausted, that they maybe then adjust and go, we're not doing as many high intensity sessions. We need to go, what is our minimum effective dose? Yeah. And then we can supplement, you know, the sessions I've taken out potentially with something else if they still want to train as frequently. And thinking about training smart so they can maintain a decent level of performance for them at that age group. Because I think if you look at masters athletes who continue to train, they'll adjust their training load so they can stay potentially the best within their age group and actually still be able to compete quite effectively. without actually training to a point where it's detrimental to performance.
Yeah, because you also want to sort of reduce that likelihood of creating more inflammation within the body, which can come on with high levels of cortisol, as we know from stress.
Yeah.
So having too much high intensity, like you say, could also exacerbate things like inflammation, and therefore those aches and pains, because we're going to get more aches and pains going through menopause. Muscles are going to get stiffer, bringing in those elements of more flexibility, range of movement, mobility as well, and just varying it a little bit more. Would that be beneficial?
Yeah, I think that's so important for everyone. And this is where you go, you individualize the approach of how working out, like, you know, what works best for that individual. Okay. So taking into account of, are the aches and pains due to the fact it takes them longer to recover from exercise? Okay. So the purpose of their active recovery, okay, or the kind of additional mobility is purely a bit more that traditional kind of musculoskeletal type framework. But then also kind of looking at, obviously for some people, they get significant like aches and pains as part of their menopausal symptoms. Okay, so it's not necessarily linked with training effects. It is just due to that decline in hormones. Okay, that again is trying to go, okay, your kind of menopause, perimenopausal experience is maybe having an impact on your ability to train as hard. Okay, so you're then adjusting your training so you can at least maintain that routine, whilst you discuss with your GP potentially options for hormone replacement or however you want to manage your symptoms from a menopause standpoint. But you're actually not just, you know, having to stop training because of the menopausal kind of linked muscle aches and pains. And then getting even more deconditioned, you're just changing to accommodate that until you get to a point where you go, this is manageable.
Yeah. The HRT, you just touched on the HRT, which I said we were going to talk about. How can HRT, is that very much more beneficial to be on HRT if you want to improve your performance, sports performance?
It depends on the symptoms. So HRT can be beneficial for a lot of women. Okay. Now, that is a conversation for them to have with their GP, gynecologist, whoever kind of really looks after this kind of health. The benefits of it would also be, it is kind of trying to manage the fluctuations of your hormones. Okay. So estrogen does give us a protective effect for things like bone health. There's a lot of estrogen receptors in joints, which is why as it declines, you start getting a bit more pain. It also has an impact on inflammation. So for some people, you're going, it can really help manage those symptoms, okay, and get them back to a bit more of an equilibrium. There are some risks associated with HRT for some groups of people who maybe do have a higher risk of certain cancers or whatever. So that's when it becomes a bit more of a conversation with a GP for you to weigh up the individual risks benefits. Okay, from a general population standpoint, the risks are generally quite low. Okay, but it tends to require a bit of a process with your doctor to kind of titrate up to get the dosage right. So it's not necessarily a case of they'll offer you something and it immediately makes a difference. For some women, they may need to increase that dosage. And there'll be other women who, you know, don't want to be medicated, which is absolutely fine, in which case they'll kind of look at making those lifestyle changes about kind of maybe tweaking diet, looking at how they change their exercise levels, looking at how to optimize sleep to manage their symptoms naturally. But for anyone that's maybe finding their symptoms are real disabling, it is definitely worth that conversation to kind of go get them back to that point where they're going, okay, whether it is hot flashes, you know, the brain fog, the muscle aches, getting those symptoms under control. So at least then you can get back into a bit more of a normal routine in terms of being able to push yourself a wee bit more.
And the fact is that actually, if you get back to playing sport, if you get back to training, all of these things do help manage those symptoms. They're going to reduce the effects of them on you, and you'll find, you know, things that obviously that's going to help in controlling the weight gain to a degree. That's going to help with your sleep. It's going to help with your mental state as well. So it's like you say, it's getting that good advice, and then so getting back to a routine, a good routine, a balanced routine of training, and getting back into that sport. So 100%. what would you say in terms of, for someone who wants to, like we say, well, they want to keep playing, maybe they want to get back to it, they want to do everything we've been talking about. So what would be your tips and your advice for getting a really balanced program, making sure you have those rest days, and in terms of nutrition, what sort of strategies that they can adapt now moving forward once they're hitting that perimenopause, menopausal state?
So for those people that maybe have had a bit of a break from training and try to get back in, potential to try and manage the risks of aging and menopause, then I'd say obviously start off slowly to begin with, okay? Just so you can reintroduce and see how your body responds, okay? For someone who's maybe stayed fairly active and is now trying to navigate that world of staying active whilst they're having symptoms, it is just giving yourself a wee bit of break. So from the intensity perspective, it is acknowledging you may need a bit more recovery, okay? Now, from a recovery standpoint, that will be anything from the point of view of adjusting your training volume and intensity throughout the week, going through your traditional type of recovery modalities. So, that cold plunge, your recovery boots, some of the kind of electrical stimulation that you can do for recovery are absolutely all great to use. So it's about trial and error to see what works best for you, okay? Because our bodies change and how we respond. So what may have worked for the 20-year-old athlete may not be quite as effective now, okay? So I think it's just keeping that open mind is probably the biggest thing for both groups, okay? Diet-wise, I think it's a case of you avoid the extremes, okay? And I think seek advice from a good nutritionist dietitian if you need assistance. Because ultimately, it can be very easy to go, I am putting on weight, therefore I'll cut calories, okay, and exercise more. Okay? Now, if you cut calories too much and you're still trying to train, you're going to put your body under extra stress, okay? So that's going to increase your cortisol, increase some of the potential symptoms you're experiencing, particularly things like your weight gain, that kind of poor control of your blood sugars, okay? And also that ability for your muscles to recover, okay? Because muscles need macronutrients like protein. They need carbohydrates to refuel, okay? So I think if you are concerned about weight, it's get good advice, okay? So that you're obviously you don't want to overeat, but you're not cutting to a point where actually it's detrimental, okay?
Yes, because like you say, you go back to that stress. And I was listening to some a podcast the other day, and they were talking about visceral fat, and they were saying that actually visceral fat, I mean, I don't know whether you would agree, visceral fat isn't so much from what you're eating, it's from stress, which of course you're already under stress going through menopause, you're under stress from training intensively, and then you're putting yourself under further stress from having the wrong eating habits.
No, I think it just kind of sets up that kind of hormonal imbalance. It's going to make things a lot more challenging, okay? But I think other than that, it's really just having a good balanced diet, okay? So trying to avoid that kind of overly processed diet, that mix of fruit and veg. So one of the dietitians I worked with previously always used to say, eat the rainbow. So try and get multiple colors on your plate for each meal, okay? Whole grains, pulses are really good for, giving you that slow release energy, okay? So it's really just balance, okay? It's not a case of going, oh, never touch another cake again. I think you need balance because sometimes mentally you just need a slice of cake,
There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly, life's for enjoying. So it's everything in moderation, okay? And I think just being open to listen to your body, because each of us, again, changes. For example, I was speaking to a colleague couple of weeks ago, and she was she'd been vegetarian for the bulk of her life. But as she was getting into this perimenopausal phase, she just felt like her body needed more protein. So starting to actually become a bit more pescatarian. Okay. So I think this is where you go. It's keep an open mind. Don't be super dogmatic. And I think if you're kind of given advice that you must follow like a particular diet, it's again, take it with a pinch of salt. If what works amazingly well for one person won't work as well for someone else. So I think it's balance and then flexibility from an individual's point of view, and seek an appropriate kind of support from an appropriate qualified professional if you need that extra bit of guidance.
Yeah, because also what I was going to ask you about, because obviously when you're a younger athlete, you're taking a lot of things like protein shakes and bars and all this sort of stuff. Is that something that you can continue doing menopausal wise, or is that just too much? Or is it a case of whether you're getting enough of the right nutrients from your diet as a whole?
Yeah, so like with regards to like protein supplements, whether it's a bar, shake, I think most good dietitians, nutritionists will always try and go for a diet first approach. Okay. Now, commonly, especially in that kind of elite level of sport, it's when you're getting to that stage where you're maybe needing like 4,000 worth of calories per day, it can be really hard to get everything you need from a purely diet approach, which is when supplements do become extremely helpful. Okay. So for some people in perimenopause and menopause, that approach might still be really key for them. It just really depends in terms of how much they are training, to be honest. Okay. Because even that, like an elite, say 40, 50-year-old masters athlete, whilst they'll probably train and need a lot more calories than your average 40 or 50-year-old recreational athlete, possibly won't need as much as a 20-year-old elite athlete. Okay. So I think this is when it really comes down to that question of maybe seek that extra advice to go, right, how much do I need to be eating? Is it realistic that I can get this from purely diet? Okay. Or do I need to supplement in particular ways? Okay. Because I think we need to kind of look at things of, some people find that they're taking a long-term protein supplements, it can affect their gut. They find it becomes a bit more difficult to potentially can't tolerate loads of like protein shakes. Okay. But that tends to be people that are like taking a lot of protein for an extended period of time. So that might be something that is worth considering of, if you can do it by diet, you're getting a bit more variety within what you're putting into your body. So you help maintain your gut microbiome. Okay. So the more irritated your gut gets, if you start losing some of your good bacteria within the gut, your ability to absorb nutrition is going to be reduced. Okay. Which could potentially then influence some of your menopausal symptoms. So if you're not absorbing nutrition as well, that might play onto your fatigue, your low energy. So that's where I'd go. Good advice is really key. So you get that balance right, when you should be supplementing and when you shouldn't.
Yeah. And when it comes to sort of scheduling your training, obviously you wouldn't necessarily want to train as long each day, or maybe as many days each week. So would there be an ideal kind of days per week, and then how you would split that up in terms of, recovery days, strength and conditioning days, maybe more functional training days for your sport? What would your advice be on something like that?
It would change depending on also your particular kind of sporting goals, and I guess kind of lifestyle as well. Okay. I think our key things, and this probably is for most people, is we probably want to be doing as a minimum the equivalent of about 30 minutes of moderate exercise 5 times a week. Okay, which probably for the more athletic person is fairly easy to do. Okay, because you'll have potentially a couple of longer sessions. Okay, so you probably don't want to be doing too many back-to-back high intensity sessions. Okay, so potentially kind of scheduling an easier day in between. Now, what that easy day may look like will vary depending on your goals, your sport. Okay, so you may have, if we use a tennis example, one day where you have a high intensity session on core. The next day might still be an on-court session, but is a bit more technical focused. So you're still getting maybe the overall court time, but you've just adjusted the intensity to maybe focus on technique more, to allow a bit more recovery in the legs, which gives you a bit more rest breaks, etc. Okay. Likewise with strength sessions, it's the intensity in a strength session can vary a fair bit. Okay, so I think it's key, again, depending if you've got a particular injury history, or depending on what kind of your weaknesses are within your sport. So the areas you maybe need to improve on. Some of your strength sessions might be quite high intensity as well. Okay, so I think this is where you need to have that overview of your full program to kind of go, okay, if you are physically as good as you can be from an injury prevention performance standpoint, you might find your S&C sessions are more maintenance based, so you can keep the intensity a bit lower. Okay, so they might still be classed as an easier day. Okay, whereas someone who maybe does have some deficiencies and is maybe at higher risk of a particular injury, we may find some of your high intensity days are actually in the gym versus on the field or on core. Okay, and that's when you then maybe need to go, right, that particular gym session cannot be programmed back to back with a tough sporting session. Okay,
right, yeah.
So there's not like, again, a one size fits all. You need to look at that whole picture and kind of go, what do I need to achieve with my training? What's my ultimate goal? Where's my priorities for the next 8 to 12 weeks? And then you maybe have some periods where you go, it's injury prevention, so the gym is maybe a bit more my priority. So some of the sport sessions are lower intensity, more technique focused, so I can really blast the gym well. And then as I get stronger, I reduce some of my injury risk factors. We can turn that on its head. And for also anyone who's still semi-competitive as well, that maybe it also has competitions, that's going to be a factor in terms of their planning as well. So there's a multitude of things that are going to get people going, these are the days I take it a bit easier.
Yeah. So it sort of goes to that, like when we spoke last time, we were talking about someone's history, someone's story, where they want to go is really important for setting that correct training program, really. Because one person playing the sport is going to be more important. Another person, the person wants to play the sport, have fun, but they actually want to get more fitter and get stronger. So maybe the gym session is more important. It really depends on your, like say, your motivation, your goals, what you want to do. And then I would guess just to wrap up and just to sort of summarize everything, ideally, first of all, you want to make sure you get the right advice from your GP, from therapist, whoever it may be, but ultimately your GP, and make sure your health is okay. And when it comes to taking things like your nutrition and your supplementation or HRT, the doctor, get a good nutritional advice, and look at maybe whoever you're going to go to help you with your coach, your sports coach, if you have one, people like yourself, previous injuries, and just get really a full assessment before you start and really plan. I would say plan how you're going to train, what you want to do, why you want to do it. And then, ultimately, factor in those rest days as well as you're going through.
100%. I think it is just that being organized, being open and honest about it. And like you say, it is including all the key stakeholders in those conversations. Because even with the best plan in the world, sometimes you will have blips where you just feel, things are a wee bit worse. That you should just get to this point where you can feel comfortable, like you say, to say to your coach, if we planned an intense session, but my sleep was terrible last night, or I'm particularly achy today, that people can make adjustments, and you keep that degree of flexibility, okay, versus having to feel like you're either giving up or you're absolutely slaughtering yourself to get through a session and not actually getting the benefit for all that pain.
Yeah, and I think don't be, because like you say, we've all been, well, I've certainly been through it. You get those days and you're just not feeling it, and don't beat yourself up. Don't feel guilty, because even though you're used to, you always want to be on it and sort of motivated and competitive. If you have a day when you, like you say, you're just exhausted or your body's just feeling tired, and you just think, I just want to sit on the sofa and do something else, or go and see a friend, then go and do it. It's don't beat yourself up, because that really plays into sort of the mental health side of things. And you already, anxiety is a natural symptom of menopause. And if you're just having one of those days, just say, do you know what, I just need a rest day. And that's going to be the best thing for you. Eat well, get plenty of rest, and then come back the next day and restart, I guess.
Sometimes we all need that wee reset. So enjoy it and can restart the next day.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you, Laura. This has been really insightful. I know many women, myself included, is going to take those strategies and little ideas away, tips away, and go and implement them straight away, because I think it's going to be really useful for those who want to really still play well and play at their sport, but also enjoy it, because it's not going to be your career now. Your career isn't based on your sports performance, but you want to still have fun and be competitive as well, and play into that part of how you're built, your lifestyle and what you want to do. So I think there's been great tips, great advice. And I know from last time people can get in touch with you through, I think you said The Remedy. Is that correct?
Yep, The Remedy.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you, Laura, for joining me today. It's been great to have you back. And maybe in the future we'll have you back again to discuss another subject. But for now, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on this episode of Unleash Your Inner Athlete. And we look forward to you joining us next time. Have a really great day. Thank you.